This is Bob Tucker at the Oklahoma State Chamber of Commerce meeting at Fountainhead State Lodge, Thursday, November 11th, 1971. The next speaker you will hear will be that of Ed Vennard, President of Commonwealth Management Consultants and past Executive Director of Edison Electric Institute of New York. The title of his talk will be Oklahoma, 1989.
I don't know any stories about New York. If I did, I wouldn't tell them. As a matter of fact, if AT&T's headquarters was in Texas, I wouldn't be telling any stories about Texas either. But we are now going to take a look into the future, and our next speaker will take us up to the year 1989 to tell us what our city and rural community will look like at that time. Ed Vennard, President of Commonwealth Management Consultants in New York, is the former Managing Director of the Edison Electric Institute in New York, the trade association for all United States electric and power companies. He held this post for 13 years. Prior to that, he was an executive for 25 years with Middle West Service, a Chicago consulting firm. Mr. Vennard is the author of 2 books, Electric Power Business and Government and the Power Business. He is the co-author of a course on the American economy for employees of industry and co-author of a high school textbook on the same subject. Mr. Vennard has made 5 visits to the Soviet Union during a technological and cultural exchange program arranged through the State Department. As a member of a group of engineers on the tour, he visited electrical power facilities in the Soviet Union, Poland, and Czechoslovakia. He has a Bachelor of Science degree and degrees in mechanical and electrical engineering from Tulane University. Now I am very pleased to present Mr. Ed Vennard. Ed?
Mr. Chairman and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, I've got to watch it, ladies. I see 3 or 4 or 5 there, 6, 7. I don't know any Texas stories. I will tell you a true story. Sometimes, to me, these are more comical than the made-up ones. This happened to me. I was to give a talk in England. Not always good to ego where you can mention foreign country speakers, you understand. And I had heard that these British people lacked their sense of humor. And here was my audience here, some 500 or 600. And I said, do you mind if I test out that question of the British humor? They couldn't say no, I had them. And so I told this story. I said I was here in England some years back at a cocktail party. A little English lady came to me and said, "You're an American?" "Yes." "I have a son in America who hasn't written me in 5 years. Do you mind looking him up and have the man write me?" Well, I said, "What's his name?" "His name is Dunn." "Where does he live?" "I don't have the exact address. It's a little white house in Connecticut." "Well, what do you do?" I mean, you say yes, and I fly back to Kennedy, and I get this tour on the way and get in a cab, ought to go to Connecticut. "Well, where in Connecticut, fella? Never mind technicalities. I want to go to Connecticut." Well, we drive 35 miles and get across the line from New York to Connecticut. He said, "Well, here we are now." I said, "Where do you want to go?" I looked around and saw a filling station. "I'll ask there." I go to the filling station and say, where is the little white house? Well, right on behind there. I go behind, and there's a little white house. I open the door. There's a man sitting there. I said, are you done? He said, yes. Why in the hell don't you write your mother, I said. To me, the funny part about you've just listened to a marvelous story of Oklahoma, up to date. My chore is to forecast to 1989, 20 years from now. I wish I could give you one of my number 6 speeches. They make about 50 a year, but I can't. This had to be a new one. And so I did some research on this one. And I want to share that with you. To forecast 20 years is a project. I am going to use something of that background to predict how we now innovate as businessmen and business managers to bring about this change that is changing so rapidly. A better title, I think, is The Acceleration of Change. It is going up in geometric progression. Next, I think we should remind ourselves that we are living in a world that has to adapt itself, whether we like it or not, to 2 overriding facts. Fact 1, this rapid change that's going on, that we're living through right now. One estimate has it that between 1900 and World War II, we doubled our knowledge. Between World War II and to date, we doubled again. And we're now doubling every 10 years. In other words, to forecast 20 years hence, we must realize that 3/4 of what we will know then, we don't even know now. Therefore, we have to rely upon patterns of growth to make such a forecast. And I want to go into those patterns with you. The second fact that has to be reckoned with, and that is this continuing, grinding struggle between the people of the free world and those people led by Red China and Russia. Let's make no mistake about that. This is a struggle that can't be compromised. It is so important to us for the simple reason that both sides have developed mechanisms that, if turned loose, can destroy all mankind. Therefore, it behooves us to analyze how we got into this position, and then to use our ingenuity to find a way out of this predicament. Another illustration now about the acceleration of change. There are many ways to illustrate that, and you've heard many. I like the one that Toffler mentioned in his book on future shock. I don't agree with many things he said in that, but he gave this illustration to us to bring home the rapidity of the changing change. He said, picture, if you will, the last 50,000 years of man on earth. That's about the beginning of the time when he could beat the monkeys on the head and use the intelligence to persevere and preserve himself despite his weak muscles. Let's picture now 800 men each with a lifetime of 62 years. Then you have one man for each of the generations, and that'll spread all the way back 800 to 50,000 years. And those 800 men you could put in this hall with the extension back there. Of those 800 men, representing the whole span of history from 50,000 years until now, the first 650 lived in caves or worse. Only 70, the first 3 or 4 rows here, could even communicate one with the other, with a grunt or something better. Only the past 6 people down here on the front row out of that 800 ever saw the printed word. It is then they could really communicate one with the other and start the big cycle upward in changing. Only the last 2 down here ever used a machine to get his work done. And all of our industrial civilization is based on the machine. There are only 2 experienced. And during the lifetime of the one man, you have developed almost everything you're using now to make life pleasant for yourself. Now picture from that increasing speed of change what that next life will do for you, what these kids are going to do between now and the next 20 years, or 30 or 40 years. Think for a moment as to how we have changed our method of inventing things. Just up until the last century, invention was haphazard. A man here, a man there, thinking of something new, trying it out. Edison and Alexander Graham Bell changed that a bit and established a laboratory to go after specific projects. Today you have great complexes of industries led by business management teams and great complexes of research laboratories. Today you simply state your objectives and you organize yourselves to do it. And you do it. You get the job done by amassing a great mass of talent on each project. Getting what done? What kind of job? Building a pipeline across the country. Cross the English Channel and take over the German army. Build the atomic bomb. Control that bomb so the heat will be dissipated not in a fraction of a second, but over a year. Put a man on the moon. Let him walk. Let him talk to us on Earth. And let us see him in our living room. Build a new cereal. And let 100 million Americans know about it. Put miniskirts on women. Then change to hot pants. Name it. And the project is done. The best illustration, it seems to me, of this technique of getting a job done, no matter how complicated, is during World War II, when Einstein wrote a letter to Roosevelt. Now, I might not have liked the gentleman, excuse me, Mr. Machine there, but give him his due. But to understand the magnitude, we should carry ourselves back to a 26-year-old boy in Germany, a dropout from high school, who said the most fantastic thing, that all of your scientists of history have been wrong. They have all said that matter and energy cannot be interchanged. He said you can exchange them. You can change matter to energy, And the relationship is E is equal to mc squared. The energy in the mass atom is equal to the weight of the mass times the square of the speed of light. I don't know why the speed of light or why the square of it. You know, the square of light goes at 186,000 miles per second. The square of that is 93 million. He told the world you can split that atom and get the energy that is 93 billion times the weight. He had a pencil and paper to work with. Nobody even understood the fellow. This is Einstein, 26 years old. After some 15 or 20 years, the top scientists began to think maybe that's so, and changed their thinking. He wrote Roosevelt. He had come to our country then, teaching at Princeton, and said, this is so, this can be done. Roosevelt called in his top scientists and said, is that so? They said, yes, we think so. Can you do it? Yes, we think so, given the wherewithal. He said, do it. Now there you had the very steps we all take now in carrying through a project, whether in big or elsewhere. You state the objectives. You analyze the problem. You draw up a plan. You test the plan of building a model of it. If it works, you order it done. Then you allocate the wherewithal to do it with, the money. Then you build it. Then you go back and check it. You take those steps, no matter what project you're on in your own business, or how big the project. Roosevelt launched the Manhattan Project. And all that was needed in the way of men and money and material. Only 5 men knew, out of 125,000 that worked on this, what was being done. They hired 125,000 of the top men in the world to work on that. In over 4 years, they spent $2.5 billion and took this little package that they had built out to the desert of New Mexico and put this high on a stand and got 3 miles away in case this thing might work. And threw the switch and changed the whole world. It worked. You stopped the war. And maybe prevented World War III. At least you and I have seen in the past 10 years the duplicative conditions of World War I and World War II, up to the point of pressing buttons. Each side knows that when he does that, he's gone also. Maybe you stop that. This is an example of a stupendous project, to me more stupendous and fantastic than putting a man on the moon. But think of what happened after that. Only the 125,000 men had this knowledge in their heads. Businessmen had no knowledge of this atom and how to split it to get the enormous heat. Congress passed a law and it said, make the knowledge known to all. Businessmen then said, let us control this bomb. And by the same technique, the same procedure, the same number of people, but it took 10 years of research and development to control this expenditure of heat in a fraction of a second to months or years. And so you have a new fuel to help us get our work done. This is what I mean by the rapid speed in change, in innovation, in getting a job done that you and I now have at our command in getting our work done. We can state the objective, then do it. And I'm going to try to predict how we're going to use that technique in making our life better by 1989. I want to say a word about the patterns of growth, because as long as we're dealing with a future that we can't even imagine, when you realize that 20 years from now, 3/4 of what we know then, we'll know we don't know now, you have to depend upon the patterns and techniques of growth to predict what's going to happen. I come back to Oklahoma to make this development of a pattern. Oklahoma is known for its development and use of the fossil fuels, gas and oil. It is the fuel, you see, that enables men to get their work done by machinery. We in America have developed that machine to the point where today 98% of all of our work here in America is by machinery, far above any use on earth of machinery and use of energy to get the work done. As a measure of the value of that, if I reduce that fuel to muscle power, I find that each working man now has working for him 500 helpers. Therefore, each working man can produce 500 times as much as he could without the machine to help him. Our whole society is based upon this use of fuel to drive the machine. I mention that for this reason, making a forecast. We have found that the use of fuel by any nation follows a very specific pattern. And I've examined the use of energy by all the 155 nations on earth. Well, the pattern is this, as you might expect. Those nations using little energy per capita, meaning using little machinery per capita, have a low income per capita. Those nations using much energy, led by U.S., meaning much machinery, have high income per capita. And so I plot a curve on that. One side of my chart is the use of fuel per capita, and down here is the income per capita in U.S. dollars equivalent. And I put 155 dots on there, the curve. Those dots form a very specific pattern through which you can make a computerized curve, a mathematical equation that shows a relationship between a people's use of energy that you're supplying here in Oklahoma and their standard of living. I made the same analysis of the energy used in this country alone by going back to 1900 to our use of energy per capita then. Now we have it now being used, and trace that against our income per capita in constant dollars, the same relationship. Now it so happens that because of that pattern of energy use, we can forecast the energy use accurately. For example, I had something to do with making a forecast of energy for this country in 1958, 18 years ago. The result of a year's work of study and planning and thinking and constructing and studying mathematical equations of these patterns. And from that, we made a forecast to the year 2000, 18 years ago. Parenthetically, the result of this forecast was way above what anybody had heretofore forecast for energy use. And for a while, I was criticized by those who had to make the machines use the energy to convert this. Well, I said, that's the way it's going to be. And we who did that stuck our neck out a bit. The point is this. That forecast has been checked every year. Now, if you run 2 or 3 years under what you have forecast, you change your sights a bit. Or you run 2 or 3 years the other way, you change a bit. The use has gone like this on that curve. And today, the error is 0.3%. from that forecast 13 years ago. And yet the energy use is more than double of 13 years ago. And you must take into account all the new things people are going to use with their energy. If we can forecast energy accurately, and if there is a definite correlation between a people's use of energy and their living standards as expressed in the income per capita, I took a forecast of the U.S. energy use for 1989. And by the mathematical equation I've developed what the income per capita will be in 1989 for the average U.S. citizen. It is going to be roughly 50% higher than it is now in constant dollars after adjusting for inflation. In other words, the buying power 20 years from now of people in Oklahoma will be 1.5 again the size it is now. This checks very closely with the U.S. Chamber forecast, which says that income per capita in constant dollars in the year 2000 will be 2/3 above that now. The forecast shows that 2/3 of all of our people then will have incomes of $10,000 a year or above. It shows that 3% or 4% will have incomes of $3,000 a year or less, the so-called poverty group. But when you call these people poverty-stricken, and we do think of them as being poor and poverty-stricken, please don't get the notion, and don't let them get the notion that they better their lot by changing the system to the Russian system, because I was there 5 times. I saw it. The average person in Russia lives about like our people live on relief. Now, as we raise our living standards in America or any country, it goes up across the board, and not just to the privileged few. In 1950, 10% of our people had incomes of $3,000 a year or less. And so we are approaching a time we can cater to this, take care of this. One more statistic on income. As of now, 19% of all of our income is supernumerary. Did I say it right, Bernard? Yes. Supernumerary, by the way, is the income over and above all the promise it can be for a good life, and you can spend as you please. It's now 19%. It'll be 30% by 1980. In other words, the forecast shows a good life and a better life for those 20 years to come. How will we be living then? Again, I have to go to patterns of growth. When I realize that we don't know so much more then, we can cope with our problems better then. As you know, we are now going through in the United States a very decided trend from rural and small towns to big cities. That will continue. As a matter of fact, throughout the world, the same trend is there. We have seen nation after nation change from an agricultural nation to the industrialized nation. As of now, we have 5% of our people on the farm to feed us. In Russia, 50% to feed them. And these 5% of our people feed 200 million Americans plus 160 million outside of America. And that's dropping rapidly as we further mechanize our farms. The experts on city planning and population trends see by 1980 and 2000 a few large super cities. They're called megalopolis.
You can see one on the eastern seaboard now, stretching almost from Portland, Maine to Richmond, Virginia. That'll be one super city. One on the whole eastern coast of Florida. One on the west coast of California, a super city. We see one going there from Chicago, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Toronto, as a super city. This growth towards the super city is presenting many complicated, unpleasant problems in the field of transportation and environment. Interestingly enough, with all of our conversation about transportation and environment, we now know all we need to know to straighten out the transportation and straighten out the environment. Not the fanatical environment people, but the practical environmental changes that we know should be made in our big cities and elsewhere. What we need now, don't you see, is a decision of community leaders to do it. And I'm seeing those decisions being made as I go around the country. On transportation, for example.
We can picture the big cities having all of their transportation separated. So the high-speed traffic is not on the street. It's underneath or above. We see a separation of traffic, not just cross traffic, but between traffic and people. And that's happening in many cities now. We see the whole downtown areas of the future city being under some kind of a dome, with full climate control inside of the whole downtown area, which is doable and is being done in some cities.
With promenades on the first two floors, for example, that is going up and down, and the traffic someplace else, besides on those streets. We see the recycling of our waste that can be done now. We see the recycling of our water that can be done now, and we'll know more 20 years from now. We see the desalinization of seawater, which is being done now and being perfected so it'll be cheaper in a big process when a big nuclear plant is combined with a desalinization plant to get cheap water from the sea. Those are coming. The research has been done. The models have been built. They work. What about the home? Well, you'll have a dial control of climate, not cooling and heating, which are elementary factors in comfortable climate. There are 5 or 6 things you want to be comfortable in the home. You want humidity control. You want gentle air movement, not a jet stream going down your neck. I don't like this air conditioning. Gentle movement of air. Refreshing of air. Filtering of air. And the dials let you dial these air conditioning conditions in your home. You want control of noise in the home, where decibels are down to a certain limit. These are doable now. We'll have those then. And if you trace the rapid growth of air conditioning, you can see these perfections of conditioned air coming. What do we have in the way of joys of living in the home? Well, think of it this way. In the past 10 years, 15 wholly new things have been developed for the home. And man is not going to stop inventing or developing his ingenuity. You're going to have 15 new things per year. That means 30 things between now and the year 1989 that you can't even visualize today. And you'll have them. You'll have a few of those things you couldn't think of just 20 years ago. The dishwasher, the TV, the color TV, of course, the dryer, the room cooler of any consequence. These are things that are new inventions. The freezer. What will it be in the future? I'll tell you some things now being in the laboratory. The robot sweeper, But you know, you won't freeze very much in this house that's fully climate controlled. The dust is out. In my own home, for example, I have much of this stuff now. Having been in the power business for 18 years with manufacturers, always trying to use something you see they're making. I've got 163 appliances. The last thing they sent me, hold your hat. The last thing I got was the electric spaghetti fork. You know, when you have spaghetti, you take a spoon and a fork and you twist this thing. You muscle. That takes muscle power. This gives a gentle twist of the fork and you twist the spaghetti. The robot people will be here. You're going to have cleaning and washing by ultra rapid sound waves. You're going to have the whole wall is your TV set. That's being developed now. There'll be light size in the recreational center in the home. Likely three-dimensional. The experts say yes on that. Give us time. It'll be like having people there and actors in the room with you, acting them. The kitchen being designed now is a neat, small piece of furniture, like a mahogany furniture. The whole kitchen, you can roll into the recreation center and prepare meals there. Dishes, disposable, of course. The computer, just as the engine has replaced 98% of all muscle power and allowed working men to earn more and to produce more, the computer is going to help the man in his mental energy and replace the drudgery of adding and multiplying figures. That's most of our work. And speed up this process of innovation. All of my forecasting so far has been on the basis of natural resources. But there is one resource that is built into our system here that we can't call natural. This individual freedom we now have to move around, to innovate, and to try new things was earned by struggle of men. Moral struggles, mental struggles, physical struggles to get it. If I was to enjoy and through perseverance to keep, or through laxity to let go. If we let go, which we might, all peoples of the past have. The Greeks let go, the Romans let go, all the signs here are letting go. If we let go, all bets are off, what I forecast. Because in the record past, that ingredient is there. And that ingredient continues on. If we don't, the whole forecast is off. Why do I say that? As long as man has been on this earth, for all of 50,000 years, he's been trying to devise systems under which people can live together. You know, when a man lives alone, that's easy. He can do as he pleases, make his own choices, and there's nobody to tell him no. He does not infringe upon anyone else's right. But when more than one person lives together, as most people do today, they must devise some way to get along. And that then brings up the age-old problem of how do people live together peacefully in a community or a state or a country and respect the rights of others. You can look back through history and look at all your tribes and city-states and states and governments. You can call the top man a Caesar or a Czar or a Führer, but you'll find that for most of his time on earth, man has lived under a system where he was subservient to government and not a free agent. About 90% of the time, of those 50,000 years, that way. And during those years, he's developed just two basic
forms of society. They have 1,000 variations. In essence, there are these. There is that system where men turn over to government the right to regulate and run their lives for them, and to plan their lives, and tell them where to work, and look out for their welfare. And Russia and China are the examples of that in our modern world. And as long as man is subservient to government for his welfare, he is not free from government. That's your definition of freedom. The other system is where men retain for themselves the responsibility for their own lives and welfare, and take the risk involved in that. Well, people are saying all over the world, which of these two is the better? And that's a big debate at UN and elsewhere. Well, you have two countries now that have been going certainly 50 years, and as I've said, most of what they've got today has been in this last man's life on earth, these 62 years, in the past 50. Almost all we have in the way of living standards has occurred during these 50. Look at the record. One nation, planned economy. One nation, a free economy. And I've been to Russia 5 times. And I've been there to study the economy, what makes it tick. And I know that. And I reported back to the State Department and to the Congress. That's what I saw. By all measures, you'll find the living standard in America somewhere between 2 and 3 times that of Russia, either in adjusted income per capita, or in purchasing power, or the way they're living in the home, or in the food, clothing, housing, or in recreation, name it. Furthermore, you will find this, which to me is the answer to our question here, which one is better? Better doing what? In producing those things people want and need for a good livelihood, for their food, clothing, housing, and the things they really want to make life easier. The productivity in the United States, the output per man-hour work, is 1.5 times that in Russia. That's the measure of the efficiency of a society in producing things they want. But these things are never static. We find Russia gravitating towards ours. I'd like to describe that to you, but it won't be time. But for example, in 1950, I saw Russia was what you would call a communist state where the government runs everything. They tell a man what to make, what to produce, what to charge, where to work, everything. And I talked to a shoe man. He manufactured shoes. I quizzed him. He says what kind to make. The boss does, the head man in Russia. He gives me the capital. He says who to hire, what to pay them, what to charge for the shoes. And I sell just the kind they want to sell. Well, that's pure government-planned economy. 1968, and I found this across the board. I talked to a shoe man to make it parallel. Conversation like this. I get my capital from the government, but I decide what kind of shoes to make. I have surveyed my public. See what kind they want. Ladies like color in their shoes, not all black. I give the kind of shoes they want. I price my shoes. I hire the people I want. I adjust their wages, and I pay those wages. And then he said, furthermore, I made 2 million rubles profit last year. Now, that word profit came through the interpreter. I said, ask the general what it means by the word profit. Well, he said, in effect, you dumb cluck, I had a certain income and had a certain expense that I could hold down, you see, by good operations there. My margin there is what I could keep. That's my profit. I said, I understand that. I said, now ask the man what he did with the profit. Well, he said, fella, that's simple. I used part of that profit to keep in my business to make better machines so I could do better next year. And the balance I gave to employees, those who worked harder, so I paid them more.
I said, tell the duck, we call that capitalism. What do you call that? The man laughed. I don't care what you call this thing. It works. These people have been here, you understand, and have seen the efficiency of production. Do you recall Mickey Yon coming here and picking up our little go-kart that going in a chainsaw that picks up off the shelf? I had told them that this chainsaw runs on a 1.5% profit, and had explained that as a margin. That's all they had. You wouldn't believe it. I checked it. My next trip in Russia, chainsaws there, little go-kart. When they began this thing in Russia, all these farms were commune farms, and all farmers had to put their produce into a central warehouse. Some 5 or 6 years ago, the kulak said, give us 1 acre, won't you, to grow our own food. 1 acre for our food and 99 acres for you. Okay, that sounds fair enough. My next trip there, I found these kulaks from 1 acre, growing more than they need, selling to neighbors for a profit, and now half the food stuff in Russia is on the 1 acre. The gravitation is there. By the same token, you and I, and many thoughtful people, see in America a gravitation towards the government-planned economy. Step by step by step, as people who should take care of themselves call upon the government to feed them and take care of them, contrary to all of the principles of that free society. Don't you see the free society has an Achilles heel? It is this heel that lost us in Greece and Rome and those decades. And that is this. In the free society, every man has a right to express a judgment as to how he shall live and the kind of life he wants. But for any man, his judgment is no better than his knowledge on any subject. Our measurements of public opinion, the scientific measure of attitudes and behavior patterns, disclose a disturbingly high percentage of people believing in those things that can exist only under the planned economy. And those same surveys disclose a disturbingly high percentage of ignorance of the basic economic facts that are pertinent to any society aimed at improved productivity and living standards. If I analyze these studies by separating into one pile those people who are informed and those who are uninformed, and by the way, the younger they are, the less informed they are, which is understandable, with one exception: the students who major in economics in college stand out as informed people. If I divide the people between the informed and uninformed and run these through computers to get their attitudes and behavior patterns as the kind of society they want, the uninformed people choose by their ballot the government-planned economy. Informed people choose this one. The key is education. Who are these people I speak of? You know who they are? They're your employees and mine. 80% of all people who work have their jobs created by a company or a corporation, run by business managers that have access to all avenues of communication, all avenues, through employee group discussion, through TV networks. We have the key to saving this thing. And who is more responsible than we are? Community leaders. There are 20 facts, roughly,
that form the basis of our society. It is ignorance of these 20 facts that is causing this shift to the left that disturbs us so greatly. I propose a project no bigger than crossing the channel, no bigger than the bomb, no bigger than building a pipeline across the country. It is a very simple objective. Inform 100 million Americans of 20 facts. That's entirely doable. The research has been done. The models have been built. It's been tested. It works. The cost of it, hold your hat. 1% of the advertising budget of the top 100 corporations will do it over a period of years. I say let's spend 99% of our promotion and marketing on our product and 1% on selling this society that makes it possible. Who knows? It may be that Oklahoma will pick it up and be the first one to go. Thank you very much indeed.